What qualifies something as being ancient? From around 3000 BCE, which was the invention of writing, to the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which was 476 CE, is considered ancient history. This video is going to be an in-depth explanation on all the different types of building styles around the world at around this time in ancient history. We're going to be looking at ancient China, Rome, and Greece, and comparing all of them, as well as looking at modern day architecture and seeing what kind of things we took from those eras. Ancient Greek architecture is likely what people's minds come to when they think about ancient architecture, mainly because it is the most prevalent in our society. They are the standard for most of the things that we build today, like this. Behind me is the Valley Forge Memorial Arch. As you can see, it takes a few different aspects of Greek architecture, mainly the arch and also the pillars on the outside. Pillars in ancient Greece are a lot of the times what we see survive the longest. Things like Greek temples, like Era-II, which is a Doric temple from the classical period, and the Acropolis in Athens. The main architectural orders are Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. And to keep it short, it basically correlates to the amount of detail put into these pillars. For example, Corinthian pillars have detailed leaf designs, or something of the sort, at the top, and usually strong and detailed bases at the bottom. And another example is Doric, which is typically seen as the most simple, and there isn't very much detail put into them. What's behind me is likely classified as Ionic pillars, seeing as there's plenty of detail, but it's nothing too crazy like you would see in ancient Greece. Another unique aspect of Greek architecture is the theater. They were often built into hillsides and took advantage of the terrain to give the viewers of the performances an interesting view of the landscape as well. These building styles also carried over to the next subject. The Romans' building style was heavily based off of the Greek style, so I'm only going to cover the more unique aspects. The main difference Roman building has over their Greek predecessors is the materials that they used, mainly their experimentation with concrete and arches. Before Romans used concrete, they used a type of volcanic stone called tufa. Although tufa never went out of use, it slowly got taken over by concrete based on how effective it was in building. On the other side of things, marble was pretty slow to be used because it was seen as a more extravagant material to build things out of. That is, until it was popularized after the reign of Augustus. The template for a typical Roman city was usually the same. It surrounded a large plaza in the middle with the more important buildings directly around it. And then it would be residential areas and farmland after that. It was also very common for markets to spring up among the forum, being the middle, the plaza of the town. A huge aspect of Roman architecture were typically the aqueducts. They're very impressive pieces of engineering that would take water from one place, typically far away, and bring it to another place without the use of pumps. So it would just be using gravity. The amount of precision needed to create a quality aqueduct was pretty impressive. It needed just a slight decline from the source to make it there safely without rushing in or just not working at all. They were incredible feats of engineering that still stand today. And of course, you can't have a discussion about Roman architecture if you don't talk about the Colosseum, which is one of the most impressive things that is still standing that is also that old. The Colosseum was a colossal amphitheater made for gladiator battles, and one of my favorite parts about it is that they were able to fill it up like a pool and have seafaring battles with boats on it. Overall, I believe Roman architecture greatly benefited and took a lot of its inspiration off of Greek architecture, and we wouldn't have some of the most impressive buildings that we have today without it. Ancient China has a completely different type of building style. Being so far away from both Rome and Greece at any time, there wasn't much inspiration taken. The main difference between Chinese architecture compared to other types at the time are the types of materials that they used, mainly relying on natural materials such as wood instead of stone or concrete. Now, while wood was great at the time, it doesn't last as long as stone or concrete, so we don't have as many of them left. A major structural difference in Chinese architecture is that they would use interlocking wooden brackets called dugong. This helped distribute the weight of the roof down to the rest of the building. And it also allowed these buildings to be made without having large structural walls. Another large visual aspect, as I'm sure most of you would know, is that Chinese style roofs tend to be curved upwards, and this helped with redirecting rain flow, considering that most of the buildings were made of wood. Leakages were not viable. While this was also a functional aspect, it also had a lot of cultural significance, mainly being seen as protection. The layout of these Chinese buildings were also important, lying along a central axis, usually being pretty symmetrical. This was meant to reflect ideas of order and balance, and a good example of this would be the Forbidden City. At the same time, we also have a good example of the biggest wall made in history, the Great Wall of China, which has been standing for a very long time. This was a good example of how Chinese architecture could not only be used as decorative and functional, but also defensive. While I only covered just a little bit of ancient architecture as a whole, there's a lot of history to go through. But I feel like reflecting on ancient architecture and how we use it today is a good way to have some sort of appreciation for what we see in our modern day lives. I feel like it goes without saying that without ancient Greek architecture to kind of get the ball rolling, we wouldn't have a lot of the things that we do today, and we would likely have a completely different building style. For example, ancient Chinese architecture did not only stay in ancient China, it spread all throughout Asia. It's extremely prevalent in Japan and in Taiwan and in a lot of the places surrounding China, just because it was such an efficient building style that people kept using it throughout history. Thank you for watching. I hope this video served as a good example of how useful ancient architecture is in our daily lives.